Just
Right. I mean, I
James?
guess the question is, you've got this. The overarching thing that has people really riled is the January 6 writers, some of whom pled guilty. I was in one of the trials for the Proud Boys and for the Oath Keepers, and I watched the whole thing, and
Yeah.
I watched it play out, and it played out as any justice, any trial would play out. And here they're pardoned, and
Yeah.
they could seek
Look,
money, should they be able to.
Please like, subscribe, and share the channel. In today's video, CNN host Sara Sidner put Scott Jennings on the spot during CNN's News Night. Right now, many Americans are asking one big question. Why are politicians focused on billion-dollar funds linked to Trump allies while everyday people struggle to afford rent, groceries, and healthcare? This issue goes beyond politics. It's about accountability, transparency. Let's get into it.
Taxpayers who are paying for this are not going to know who this is going to. This is so bad. It is so bad. It's so bad prima facie. It's just bad on its face. But then when you put it in context, in the fact that Americans can't afford gas, Americans can't afford groceries, farmers are going bankrupt all over this country. We are in the middle of a war that's now cost $50 billion. He wants $1.5 billion for a ballroom. He wants hundreds of millions of dollars for an arch. He wants $15 million to paint the reflecting pool. And then you put on top of that now a $1.7 billion slush fund to pay his supporters and the people who feel victimized. I mean, I'm so old. I remember when most Republicans used to balk and be shocked and outraged by the idea of reparations to people who suffered slavery. But we're going to be giving money to January 6th insurrectionists. That part's okay. Yeah, it's disgusting.
Scott, is this reparations?
Look, I think there's a lot about it we don't know. I don't know who's on the committee. I don't know exactly who's going to be applying for it.
The people that Trump approves.
Well, they say anybody can apply for it, and I don't think.
Okay, I'll apply for it. You think I'll get it?
Have you ever been unfairly targeted by the Department of Justice?
I have been unfairly targeted by this administration. Yeah.
Have you been unfairly prosecuted by the Department of Justice?
Are those the people that are going to be in this?
So the answer is no, you haven't. So the issue is, the question is, has anyone in the history of the United States ever been unfairly targeted by the Department of Justice? Of course they have, and there ought to be, just at a top line, a way for people to seek recourse if they have been unfairly targeted. That having been said, this all started by the fact that Donald Trump had his tax returns unfairly and illegally leaked by the IRS. That's where all this started, and he was initially seeking damages for that, which he has given up. He'll receive no money, as I understand it, and now it has morphed into this idea that there have been people that have been unfairly targeted. All of this makes me a little uncomfortable because it's a lot of money and it didn't go through the U.S. Congress. That's number one. Number two, I don't want to see a president necessarily handpicking people to get payments where he could be accused of just picking people out who are political allies. But do I want a world where if you've been unfairly targeted by the federal government and it was truly unfair and you truly had something done to you that should not have been done, do I think people should be able to seek recourse for that? Absolutely I do, because I think it probably happens, and not on a partisan basis, but it probably happens all the time. And I think people ought to be able to seek some sort of damages if they've been unfairly targeted by the department or by the federal
government.
So
James Comey or just
Right.
James?
I mean, I guess the question is, you've got this. The overarching thing that has people really riled is the January 6 writers, some of whom pled guilty. I was in one of the trials for the Proud Boys and for the Oath Keepers, and I watched the whole thing, and I watched it play out, and it played out as any justice, any trial would play out. And here they're pardoned, and they could seek money, should they be able to.
Please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Millions of Americans are struggling with inflation, rising insurance bills, expensive groceries, and housing costs that many young families still can't afford. Farmers in several parts of the country are also facing debt pressure and higher fuel prices. Yet at the same time, Washington keeps talking about billions tied to political loyalty battles and revenge-driven narratives. That disconnect is exactly why so many people are frustrated. And as comparison to reparations, debates also highlights a major contradiction in today's politics. For years, conservatives argued that taxpayer money shouldn't fund large compensation programs connected to historical injustice or systemic harm. But now, a massive fund for people claiming political targeting seems acceptable when those involved are aligned with Trump. Critics say that makes it look less like justice and more like political favoritism. The January 6th issue adds even more controversy because many defendants were convicted using surveillance footage, text messages, social media posts, and other evidence presented openly in court. Groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers face trials with juries, defense lawyers, and appeal opportunities. That's very different from true wrongful conviction cases where innocent people are later cleared through DNA evidence or proof of misconduct. Scott Jennings does make a valid point. That government overreach can happen. History shows the FBI and DOJ have made serious mistakes before, from COINTELPRO targeting civil rights leaders to wrongful convictions overturned years later. But that's also why transparency and independent oversight are so important. Critics argue this fund appears highly political because it seems focused mainly on Trump allies and their grievances.
My personal view is anybody who committed documented violence against the government or against police officers, they've not been unfairly treated. If they ended up being convicted of a crime because of violence they committed, I got no real sympathy for them. Now, if there were people who were on the periphery that were swept up, over prosecuted, whatever, and they have a way to seek a recourse here, I have less of a problem with that. But I draw the line at violence. If you've committed political violence, if you attack the government building, if you attack police officers, I got real no sympathy.
Scott, you don't have a problem with Todd Blanche handpicking 5 people who Trump can fire at any moment and giving reparations that are then not disclosed to the American people who are paying for this slush fund?
Why do you know it's not going to be disclosed?
Because because it says so.
Is it to be public in whole or in part?
I mean, kind of like, like I have an issue with the...
So wait, it is going to be public?
Public in whole or in part.
So this is not a true attack.
There are parts that they could redact, is what you say, not disclose.
You mean
but
like the
it's not
Epstein
private from the jump.
I think that's a great example.
Look, I'll just
I have an issue with the congressional slush fund that has paid out.
I agree with you. That's all done in
sexual
secret.
claims with our taxpayer
It's all
funds,
done in
and we
secret.
don't know
I
it.
agree.
Right. And that should be transparent. It is shameful that it's not. It is ridiculous that we are even considering this in any way a right thing to do.
Look, I think transparency is important, and I'll
Yes,
but I do think partisanship aside, politics aside, people are often, will be treated unfairly by the federal government and the Department of Justice. There were certainly people during the Biden years, pro-lifers sitting, praying quietly on sidewalks who were treated unfairly. So, look, I don't think we could say the federal government and the Department of Justice is perfect. It is not perfect. And if somebody did have something happen to them that's unfair, are you saying they shouldn't be able to petition their government for some sort of recourse here? Because I do believe that.
But
now, whether the fund is the right thing,
they can't.
I don't know.
At a state level, at a federal level, people who have been unjustly targeted. I mean, we see it all the time with people who've spent, I don't know, decades in prison, and it turns out that they are innocent.
It happens.
And then all of a sudden, they get out. They're proven innocent, and they are given reparations.
But this fund will not be for those people.
Cornel West, how do you see this? I mean, could the King family come back after what happened to Dr. Martin Luther King being jailed? I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Well, first, I just want to salute you, Sister Sarah. First time I get a chance to meet you,
First time I met
high-quality
you in
journalists, just like you and Abby. It's high quality. It's always a blessing. But I just want to hear my dear brother Scott try to rationalize this in some way, and I see you're getting checkmated here, because there's just no grounds for justification of this unless you open the gates and you got trillions of dollars for ex-slaves and ex-Jim Crow people. You got 6,000 of the Innocence Project just at Harvard Law School of people who've been incarcerated, and you got 2.2 of mass incarceration. I've been blessed to teach in prison for 49 years. Now, tomorrow is Malcolm X's birthday. He's 101. What is it about Malcolm? Well, what we're talking about is this is just the peak of an iceberg. When you're living in an empire that is unraveling because the hatred and the greed is overwhelming. And so there's no sincerity, there's no integrity, there's no character. So people will justify anything in the name of power and might as opposed to integrity and what is right. That's a spiritual crisis. That's a moral crisis. Malcolm X was right about that. I was glad to see his face on that magnificent banner down there in Alabama when they marched in Selma and Montgomery. Martin was there, Fannie Lou Hamer was there, but it's not a question of skin pigmentation. It's a question of character, integrity, and the attempt to do what is right. There's no integrity in justifying $1.8 billion of people who engaged in criminal activity actually killed some policemen. And they get compensated, they get reparations, and black folk, indigenous folk, other folk, unfair, even white brothers and sisters who have gone to jail innocent, who deserve some kind of accountability. There's no way you can justify this. But this is just one peak of an iceberg. What we're seeing is spiritual sickness, moral decrepitude, and political corruption on steroids. But the good news is you still got folk in the country who are trying to exemplify some integrity and character and courage.
Peter, is there, and to you also, Sabrina, is there a way to fight this? Because there has to be someone who's injured by this, right? So the public, the general public, who can say, hey, these are my tax dollars, they're not really considered
if
victims
only
of
the
this.
taxpayers had a claim against frivolous spending by the government. That would be a wonderful thing to have. No, I mean, the Trump administration is going about this all wrong. The way you're supposed to do is you're supposed to have folks set up a nonprofit, and then you either have a company do the third-party payments into the federal government for leniency, or you just allocate tax dollars from like the Inflation Reduction Act, and that goes to your political allies. That's how you button it up, you make it legal, and you avoid all of this. But to your point, like on the historic discrimination, I mean, there was $2 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act that was allocated for black farmers in the South who had been historically discriminated against by the USDA. Like, there have been tons of programs that have done this. I think there's a very legitimate claim, and let's be very clear, I agree with Scott. We're not talking about, and if they are, I condemn it, money going to folks who violently assaulted police officers. I know folks who were at January 6th, broke no laws except they were on the side of an invisible line, did not enter any building, were not violent, whose lives were upended and ruined, where other folks who were maybe not at the same political persuasion, who had committed, similar minor offenses, weren't even charged or didn't even have those charges brought up. So I think it's important that there is parity. And if there was an overcorrection or an exertion in one direction, that tilt back.
Please like, subscribe, and share the channel. For decades, America has struggled to properly address major injustices that harmed millions of people. Black farmers lost billions in land and wealth because of discriminatory USDA lending practices, something the government acknowledged in cases like the Pigford versus Glickman settlement. Thousands of innocent people have also spent years in prison before organizations like the Innocence Project helped prove they were wrongly convicted. Families impacted by over-policing and systemic discrimination rarely receive meaningful compensation. But now, when politically connected Trump allies claim unfair treatment, billions of dollars suddenly seem available. That's why many critics see hypocrisy in this situation. Peter Meyer also unintentionally supports part of Drive West's argument when he jokes about how political insiders usually handle payouts more quietly. That kind of cynicism reflects how normalized political favoritism has become in Washington. The January 6th issue is also important because there's a clear difference between peaceful attendees and those involved in violence or attempts to block election certification. Courts already recognized those differences during sentencing. Some people received lighter punishments, while leaders of groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were convicted using extensive evidence, planning records, and testimony. That's why Drive West views this as more than just a legal debate. It's a question of character and fairness. A strong democracy depends on people believing the law applies equally to everyone, no matter their politics or status. But when accountability appears, selective and taxpayer money seems tied to political loyalty, public trust can erode very quickly. And in the long run, that loss of trust may be more damaging than any single political scandal.